wake up, cause we got motion. We showing that love from coast to coast, and planting them seeds so you know we.
Welcome, 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 everyone, to Real Talk for Real Life. I am your host, Sherry Ann Flanders Duncan. Today's topic is all about mental health. July is National Minority Mental Health Awareness Month, and our special guest, Ms. Joya Caso, anxiety support coach and licensed psychotherapist, is back by popular demand. She is here to shed light on the significance of understanding mental health in our minority communities. But before we get to that lovely lady, I have to let you know that Real Talk for Real Life is brought to you by Women of Dynamic Change, a 501c3 nonprofit. And our mission, in short, is to break down those barriers that keep women from being able to reach their full potential, whether that be a mental, a spiritual, or physical barrier. We are here to provide the resource, the education, the tools, the support, and the networking opportunities to be able to become the best version of ourselves. I tell you this every single month that all it takes is a mustard seed of faith. As this is a faith founded organization, I will tell you that little bit of faith will carry you a long way. Women, you are dynamic. You are dynamic because God has given each and every one of us a special gift. And once we understand what that gift is and how to utilize that gift, there is nothing that we will not be able to accomplish. And then when we unite with other superhero women who understand their gifts, man, that connection, that collaboration will be dynamic. So we have Miss Joya Caso, and as I said, she's back by popular demand. Joy, are you here today with us?
Yes, I am. Thank you so much for
Mhm.
having me back, but also on National Minority Mental Health Month. This is such an important conversation that we need to have more often. We know that mental health is not just in July, right? Like this is all year long that we need to be paying attention to our mental health because it is good for us and it is good for our community.
I couldn't agree more with you. But Joy, I want you to tell the world a little bit more about who you are and all the amazing things that you're doing for our society.
Thank you. I am very passionate and committed to the mission of helping all of us become emotionally and mentally healthy. And what that means is that we are to look inwards into ourselves to understand and define what it means to be emotionally healthy or mentally healthy. That can be different for everyone, but I love just walking people through those things that really resonate with them. What would it look like in my life if I am emotionally healthy? What would it look like in my life if I am able to reconnect with my emotions and pay attention and nurture my needs and my mental health? So those are some of the things that I've been doing with my one-on-one clients, my workshops, and in my community as well.
Wow, definitely are. You're doing some powerful things for the community, and I'm quite sure you're making some drastic changes in the community. And so we want to thank you for what you do, Joy. It's much appreciated. As we
Thank you.
mentioned, this is National Minority Mental Health Awareness Month, and the term minority often refers to racial and ethnic minority groups, right? As defined by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, it includes Black or African American, Hispanic or Latino, American Indian or Alaska Native, Asian American, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islander. And other minority classifications also include the LGBTQ plus community. Listen, Joy, as we talk about minorities, this is the awareness month where, like you said, we need to be aware of it, not just in this month, but all year long, right? So, how would you define mental health and why do you think it's a topic that is or remains to be taboo in the minority community?
Yes, I think that we are generally misinformed, including myself, when it comes to mental health. I didn't know the very definition of it as well, but the one that I like to use is from the World Health Organization. Mental health, simply put, is about the ways that we are able to cope with everyday things. It is not mental illness, it's not mental disorder. That is a separate thing. And mental health also includes the way that we handle difficult situations, how we face challenges in our lives, and how we contribute to our world. So it's all of those things that we are able to do or not do on a daily basis, right? It's not isolated events or anything like that. So mental health is just as important as physical health. The difference is that with the physical health, we have tangible things that we can see. So if we have a scratch, we know what to do with it, right? But emotional health, which is mental health, is a little different. It is something that can be hidden at times, right? It doesn't mean that depression doesn't always look the same. It doesn't look like sadness all the time. Anxiety doesn't look like feeling agitated all the time. They can also look very differently, such as just being tired, the exhaustion, being irritable. Those are signs that we can also take a look at in different ways, which means that our mental health is probably not where we want it to be if we are experiencing those differences in our mood or our emotions, right? So, and the second part of that question is, why is there such a stigma still? And what does it mean for our minority communities? So I think part of why it's so difficult for us as minorities is because most of us come from collective societies. What that means is that we have extended families, multi-generational families that live in one house, and we see our cousins grow up, right? Like, and we see our aunts and uncles as our role models. It's not just our parents. We have multiple caregivers that are part of our lives. Community is very much highlighted in collective societies. So we are what we call other centered. So we think of other people. So mental health is an inner journey for each one of us. So when we start to look inwards, it feels selfish, right? So there's the difficulty and the challenge. So we would rather stay silent about our struggles because we don't want to bother anyone. We don't want to rock the boat. We don't want to be a burden to anyone. And then there's also the part of shame, right? That we feel shamed when we are struggling, quote unquote, or even when we feel just something different because we are taught to, oh, you just got to keep moving. You'll get over it. You'll pass through all of that, right? Everything shall pass in its own time. And then there's also that myth of just staying strong, keeping busy. Keeping busy will keep your mind from idleness. So you should be fine, right? Like you should be fine if you're doing something, if you're occupied about something, then you'll forget about the other things. And then there's another element of the self-silencing where we just keep everything inside. We silence ourselves because culturally it is praised. It is something that is glorified. Oh, look at her. She's so mature. She doesn't bother anyone. Oh, I just like my heart breaks just saying those words. Or like, oh, she's so mature for her age, So we glorify the independence, and we glorify children becoming like parentified, right? Which means that like they take on roles that are more mature for their age, or they become the source of support for the parents at such a young age. Of course, there is cultural nuances to this, right? Like we know that it's more complicated and more complex. than that, but we can break those cycles if they no longer serve us. If we are now raising our own families and things like that, or simply just understanding that, okay, outgrown those things does serve a purpose at some point in my life. Yeah, so we praise the ones that don't ask for help, that stay quiet and just keep going about their business. And so I think that feeds into the difficulty of minorities seeking help.
I will share with you this, and for those who watch Real Talk will have heard me say this. In my home, it was taught that what goes on in the home stays in the home. So this is something that I learned at 6 years old that has stayed with me until adulthood. And we were taught that whatever we were feeling or whatever we were going on in that household had to remain there and that we couldn't share it with anyone outside. Thank God it was nothing traumatic going on, but still, we learned that if we felt sad or we were unhappy, that we couldn't vocalize that to anyone
So
outside the
true.
house.
I
And
forgot about that. Yes.
right, right. And we couldn't vocalize it sometimes even to our
No.
parents because they, again, like you said, we taught to be strong. Just if you're feeling sad, just keep going. And so this is something that now does remain in our communities, and it affects our
Yes.
children and it affects generations and
Absolutely.
generations to come. And so this is why we get into this place of being comfortable with not expressing and sharing our emotions. And so that's why we're here to help break that cycle, right? And that's why, again, platforms like this is well needed to be able to break the cycle. So, Joy, I want to talk a little bit more about anxiety, depression, and grief because it is something that affects, if not all of us, but we at least we know someone who's been affected by either or all. So, anxiety, as defined by the National Institute of Mental Health, is a feeling of worry, nervousness, or unease about something with an uncertain outcome. It's a normal response to stress, but when it becomes
Yes.
excessive, right, it can interfere with our daily lives. Depression, as defined by the Mayo Clinic, depression is a mood disorder that causes a persistent feeling of sadness and loss of interest. It affects how you feel, think, and behave, and can lead to a variety of emotional and physical problems. The Mayo Clinic also describes grief as sorrow caused by someone's death or loss. And I want to stress that because I think a lot of times, Joy, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, when we think of grief, we think about death. But grief comes from loss of any
And
sort, right? It's a
yes.
natural response to losing someone or something important, and it can affect our emotions, thoughts, and physical health. So, Joy, what are some of the common signs and symptoms of anxiety and depression that we sometimes overlook or we dismiss?
Absolutely. There are a couple of things that can be markers with anxiety and depression because there's what we call high functioning anxiety, high functioning depression, which means that we're able to go to work, we're still able to do the task, we're able to accomplish our goals and connect with our loved ones. However, that part of high functioning where we miss the symptoms, it could be things like just becoming more irritable than usual, overachieving, right? Over independence or hyper independence could also be part of, for example, feeling anxious, right? So I'm just going to go ahead and do everything myself because I don't know if the other person is going to be able to do it correctly or the way that I want. Feeling unhappy and yet still going through the motions. And it's almost like autopilot. You don't even realize, we don't even realize what's happening. It's just automatic. Right? Those could be symptoms of both anxiety and depression. There's a very thin line between the two. People pleasing could also be one where, yes, I will cater to everything you tell me and ask me so that I won't get the criticism. So that I won't be rejected, so that you leave me alone and you won't say anything else after I do all these things, and I just want to have this little corner of the world. But that's also to say that when I work with people in those stages, we definitely take a look at everything else that's happening. We never want to jump to conclusions and say, like, okay, it's depression, or it's okay, it's anxiety, and we're going to treat them without knowing the full picture, right? And you're right about grief. Grief is a loss of any kind. So for minorities, it could be loss of identity because, let's say, we're sandwiched in these two worlds. If we are immigrants, for example, I was 15 when I moved here, and I just recently realized that that was my first experience of grieving when I had to give up the way of life that I once knew and leaving my family behind and everything like that. That can also be a big loss for ourselves. And grief in itself is not necessarily an emotion, right? But anxiety and depression can come out of the process of grief. And exhaustion can also come as a symptom of grief, and just feeling tired without explanation, having brain fog or like memory concerns or problems or things like that. Those are could also be symptoms related to either one of them, like anxiety, depression, or grief, because when we go through stressful or challenging situations, depending on the event and depending on what season of life we're in, it rearranges the way that our brain process things. So that's where the brain fog comes in, or like memory problems, or lack of concentration, lack of motivation. Those things can come from that because of how we deal with challenges, and if our mental health at that time when the stressful situation came about was different. So
Thank you so much. I wanted to add to that. I wanted to share that when you spoke about the overworking to avoid your emotions, I found myself doing a lot of that where I would get off for work and then I would get myself involved into those extracurricular activities just to keep my mind off of the loss, to keep my mind off of the sadness. And so I did
yes.
everything that it took to try to avoid feeling those emotions till it got to the point where I was completely burnt out. Completely burnt out. And so I had to scale back and say, you know what, this is not healthy. And I need to take time for myself to really process these feelings and what I'm
That's
going through.
good.
So, but again, it's healing takes work. It takes work, and it does take acknowledgement and acknowledging that there is something that needs to be corrected. So, Joy, I want to know, and if you can tell us, how can we shift the narrative in our communities from being strong, because you talked about it before, to being supported?
From being strong to being supported. Wow. No, there's so many cliches, right, that we hear. It's really time for us to just pause whenever we hear something, or whenever people tell us, "Oh, just stay positive," or you'll get over it, or it's not that bad. Other people have it worse, right? Please stop and think about, like, what does that mean for you personally, right? Like, we can't control what other people say. We can't control what they believe in, but it's really time for us to just have the self-reflection and say, do I really believe all of those things? One of my favorite as in favorite to refute, is when people say what doesn't kill me makes me stronger, right? But we know by scientific evidence that everything stays with us when we don't process them. And when we keep going without pausing or even taking breaks, or this is when we get into survival mode. Yes, we need to survive, and yes, we need to have we have these goals, we need to achieve them. I agree with that, but at the same time, you are allowed, like, give yourself permission to think about why you do the things that you do. You are allowed to question them. You're allowed to change your mind. You're not betraying. I think in the minority community, speaking of minority mental health, we are so tied with our community, which is great, by the way, because everybody comes together when there's crisis. Everybody shows up for each other when someone needs help. But at the same time, we are allowed to heal. It's not a betrayal of our culture, right? I think we also tend to associate that, like, okay, if I'm gonna change, like, is that bad? Like, am I going to abandon? You're not abandoning your culture. You have both the strengths of your culture, the strengths of what's passed down to us, and we can make that stronger. We can keep going and make better, right, for our community. And from being strong to being supported, I would say it takes practice and you can start small. When someone says, "Oh, can I get groceries for you this month?" That's not impossible. I know it's happened before. If you don't want the whole grocery, you know what I mean? Okay, if you're stopping by the store, can you get me dessert? Even the smallest things we can say yes to. And we can also talk about how we feel supported. I really appreciate it when you show up for me. I really appreciate it when you call me and just check in with me. I know Sherry does that in our community, and you've done that for me personally. And I'm also learning to really welcome it and embrace it. And so it's going to be a process for us to go from being staying strong to like, okay, now can I allow myself to be supported?
And it's definitely a challenge because I'll say for me, I'm used to being the one that supports everyone else. And so I find it difficult to receive support because again, we're going back to, we've been taught, especially as women, to be strong, right? And so the small steps, I like what you said. It's the small steps, it's the accepting the groceries, which, when I was going through my time of grieving, my neighbor across the street, uh, she would actually cook for me, and hard for me to kind of accept that and why is she doing this, but when it came down to it, is she was just actually being a friend. She was there to support during my time of, or I should say the beginning of the grieving process for me. And so it takes a lot to do that. It takes a lot out of us, especially as
Yes.
we get older, to make those changes. It becomes very difficult, but if we start with the small steps, like you said, and keep going with it, it will eventually become a habit, and you
That's
will
right.
learn what it is to be supported. So let's talk a little bit about faith. Talked about faith in the beginning. So in your experience, what role do you think faith and spirituality and community plays in healing our emotional struggles?
It's so beautiful to incorporate that question, especially for us collective societies. Most minority societies, right? Like we come from that deeply rooted spirituality and faith. And I think for us, it gives us hope, gives us just like that belief that we're not alone in our struggles, and that even things like just inner work of like prayer, journaling, meditation, those spiritual practices, we have neuroscientific evidence that it also changes our brain and our body for the better, because they help produce these good hormones. It also helps us align with our goals, with our vision in life, our core values. Though faith and spirituality really does help us carry those things through. And I feel like those are also questions that I definitely ask my clients or people really that I work with when it comes to spirituality. That is a big part because we are not one dimensional. We're not robots. We're not just mental and emotional, right? We also have biological as well as spiritual factors. It's such a huge part of working with minority communities because we have that tied in many ways in our culture. There are coaching or therapeutic techniques where ancestral healing becomes part of the journey, where spiritual healing can also be part of the journey. And for me, it also depends on every person as far as what is their spirituality and what role it plays in their lives specifically. It also helps us in the healing process as far as understanding that we are not being judged for all the emotions that we are feeling. And so, in that emotional struggle, we can remind ourselves that, okay, this is part of my healing journey.
Powerful. Yeah, and I can tell you faith has played a major role in my healing journey. Jeremiah 29:11 has been a Bible verse that has carried me from the beginning to of everything up until now. And in those moments where I revert back, because as you know, Joy, with grief, it's not linear at all. You go back and
That's
forth.
right.
You go back, and I don't care how many years later it is, you go back and forth. And so Jeremiah 29:11 has been a Bible verse that has really gotten me through a lot. And not just that, just the prayer alone, having that
That's right.
relationship with God and just knowing that He is going to get you through. And He really is. It may not, I always say, He doesn't come when you want, but He's always on time and He's listening to your prayers. So just be faithful with those prayers. And
Yeah, that's
so,
so true.
yeah, thank you for
And
sharing.
while you were sharing that, Sherry, I remember this from our last podcast episode when you specifically said having that sense of purpose. That is also tied to this question. I feel like when spirituality and faith come into picture, it really does give us a sense of meaning in life, sense of purpose, which then allows us to understand our emotional struggles in that big picture.
Wow, definitely. And I want to touch again on purpose. Once you find your purpose, it really adds value to why you're here. Why are you here? You learned why you are here, and it gives you that motivation to keep going. Even on
Yes.
those days where it seems like you're alone, or when the days seem dark and gloomy, you know you have a purpose and you know there's a reason why God has you here. And so you got to keep going, but at the
Yes.
same time you still have to nurture those emotions. And that's kind of where we were talking about coming from, being that strong person but also
Right.
allowing yourself to be supported, right? So, Joy, what are some of the small, powerful daily practices? And you talked about it before, the journaling, which has been something really major for me, that can help build emotional resilience and mental well being. Can we revisit that again for the audience?
Yes, absolutely. And I believe in small practices. You and I, Sherry, we've talked about this, and I emphasize this so much because if you are in a journey, first of all, the mental health journey is not linear, right? It can go up and down, and do not panic. If you're like, I'm up and then down later on, that's life. That is just being human, and the signal that we're alive and we're breathing. And so we have that complexity in us. And so in that nonlinear journey, do not attempt to do a total makeover of your life. And so having that journaling time for 10 minutes a day will already make a difference. This is how what we call neuroplasticity works. Neuroplasticity is understanding that the brain can change. So we're not stuck, right? We're not stuck with the brain that we were born with or something like that. Or when challenges change the brain, but we can also rewire as far as those little things that we do in our lives. Journaling could be one, absolutely prayer. These things don't take too much time, and you can expand and be flexible with however time you want to allot to them. Any kind of physical movement, dancing, walking, those things already is going to help us feel aware of our emotions and reconnect, right, with our emotions. Checking in with yourselves, like how are you with the tension, tightness, your posture can also affect the way that you feel in any given moment and affect the way that your thoughts are also playing in your mind. Making connections with people that are safe for you, people that you consider part of your safe community and your support system. My daily practice includes walking, sometimes working out, depending on, I just alternate. I do pray and read my Bible. That's also part of my routine and small practice. I don't take 5 hours, right, to do those things. However long I have, I commit. It's about our commitment to ourselves. Anything will definitely help.
The commitment, the
Yes.
commitment. I'll say it again. It's the commitment to yourself. I'll share this with you and the audience. At the beginning of the year, the top of the year, I came into this year saying that I am going to work on myself, mind, body, and soul. Everything that you,
Yes.
I smile as you were talking because everything that you stated have been all the tools that I have
Mm,
used just to keep myself afloat because like you said, it's not linear. This mental health thing is not that linear. This grieving thing is not linear. I've gone back and forth, and there's times where I'm like, am I supposed to be feeling like this? I'll have a high this week, and then next week I'll have a low. Or I'll not answer the phone when I see someone calling me because I just right now I can't talk. Is that normal? So I've bounced back and forth and been all around with this grieving process. But what I have done is stay commitment to working on the healing journey. And everything that you mentioned, Joy, I have implemented. I
oh,
have implemented from,
so good.
we'll talk a little bit about the journaling before we close out, but I've implemented the journaling. I've implemented praying, meditation, even the dancing because I love music. I love music. So when I hear music and I get up and I dance, I'll dance the
Oh,
day away. And
yeah.
after dancing, I just feel so good. So whatever it takes for me to put myself in an emotionally stable place, I have tried it. And it takes work and it takes figuring out what works best for you. And so what works best for me is not going to be beneficial to someone else. And so it's very specific to what is going to help you. And so thank you for sharing that, Joy, because like I said, as you were as you were talking, I'm like, oh my goodness, I have tried everything because I am committed to healing. I'm
It is.
committed to
That's
this
what it is.
healing
Yeah.
process. So, Joy, our final question for you is what is your personal message of hope or healing for those navigating anxiety, who are navigating depression or
Mm,
grief right now?
you are worth it. You are the point. You are the whole point. And I know that sounds simple. It's just so I was saying that, but I know that's again deeply rooted in our cultures, especially as minorities, right? We are not taught, we've been programmed to make sure that everyone else is okay, that everyone is comfortable, but you deserve to heal. You deserve to take this journey for yourself because as you heal, you're also healing your families and your community. This is a form of self care for us to look inwards, and self care is not selfish. It is something that also helps our communities. It is also something that affects not only us, but our relationships. And when you take time to tend to your needs and to nurture your needs, you're also able to recognize that in other people. So I guess the overarching message is you're not being selfish if you are wanting to look deeper into your mental health.
It's all about investing into you and providing that self-care. I love that you hit the self-care aspect of this because it is. It's all about giving back to ourselves so that we can give to others, our family members, our friends, and
Yes.
even those at work. So thank you so much, Joy. You always come to Real Talk for Real Life and you drop some invaluable information. And I'm sure the audience is going to take away so much, with them today. So, Joy, what can we do as a community? And we talk about call to action. So, some of those things that we can do to increase awareness is to make sure we talk about mental health in schools in churches
Um,
and cultural hubs. I think another thing too, Joy, that we can do is I think we need more culturally competent care providers. I think a lot of times, because I've heard this before, oh, they don't know me, so I can't go to them for therapy because they can't address my needs. They don't know my culture. So I've heard that a lot, and I think that's one of the things that keeps minorities from seeking
That
mental
is true.
health therapy, right? I don't know if
Yes.
you've heard that before,
Yes.
Joy, but
Yes.
that's a common theme in the minority community, and it keeps them from seeking the help that they need. But from my experience, I've been fortunate enough to find those therapists who have been able to cater to my
You're
environment, right?
specific. Yes.
Yeah, so it is out there, but we do need more culturally competent care providers.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I think another thing too is to promote early intervention, like we talked about in schools. I think we need to start, like I always say, like I remember, I'll just use this as an example. When I was young, now I talked about how my mom or my dad used to say, what goes on in this house stays in this house. But one of
Yeah.
the things that used to always do is stress the importance of education. And I remember my mom would make my sister and I repeat back what is important, and we would say education. So that from
Oh.
young we were taught that, and so we grew up understanding the importance of it, right? So when you start young, right, and you condition the young ones that
Yeah.
sharing their emotions, expressing their emotions in a positive way, this is healthy, right? This is normal. Do you have anything to add to that, Joy, in regards to catering to the needs of our young children?
Yeah, absolutely. We can, in our homes, right, encourage that conversation. Also, we can start those conversations in our homes, but definitely encouraging organizations and schools. I know that my daughter, once in a while they'll have like topics on mental health, and once in a while they'll have like a writing prompt. I think we should follow up. We need to build more of like a follow up in our schools, or even like send things home, send materials home so that we can continue the conversations, because I don't see these things. My kids just kind of tell me a little bit, right? But I would love to see what they're talking about so that we can also provide resources for the young people.
And I agree with that because believe it or not, if they're sitting home with that education and the parents start to look at it and read it, it may shift their mindset as well, right? So
Yes, that's so true.
so
Yes.
that's a very key point. Another thing I think that we can do in our community is support legislation that protects minority access to mental health care,
Yes.
because that's another thing. Most of us, many of us, I should say, don't have access to health care at all. So mental health care is definitely not accessible, and so that is something that we need to promote and definitely fight for the
Yes.
minority community. So in closing, Joy, I just want to also just let anyone know, right, that if they know someone or if they're in a crisis or they need support, they can always contact the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline in the United States. They can call or text 988. It's available 24/7. It's free, it's confidential, and they'll provide support for people in emotional distress. They'll provide support for people with suicide thoughts, substance abuse, and any kind of emotional or mental health crisis. So just so you guys know that there is help. You said something that was key as well, that you're not alone. You're not
That's
alone.
right.
That was one of the things that I felt in the very beginning, that no one knows how I feel and I'm all alone in this. And really, so when I for sought out for help and I received that help, I began to realize that I'm not the only one going through this. I'm experiencing it in the way that I experience it, but there's other people that are going through their emotional battles as well. And so mental health, guys, I can tell you, has played a major role in my recovery, or I should say in my grieving journey, my healing process, however you want to say it, but I am doing the work. I am
Yes.
definitely doing the work. And so, Joy, I talked about earlier how when superhero women come together, And I consider you a superhero woman. And I
Thank
definitely
you.
consider myself a superhero woman. And
Yes.
when we come together and we collaborate, magic happens.
So
So,
exciting.
yes, I'm so excited. And I just want to mention to the audience that there is going to be a workshop. And this
Yes.
is the workshop alert message, guys. Miss Joy and Women of Dynamic Change will be hosting on Saturday, July 19th, a live journaling event at the Brook Church in Miami. Joy, can you just tell them a little bit about what to expect on this amazing and
Yes.
dynamic day?
Yes. We are going to meet at 11 a.m. at the location, and I'm basically just going to go through with the participants some journaling prompts, but a little bit deeper, right? Like, and we're going to do some exercises in real time, and I'm excited. This is about reconnecting with our emotions because as minorities, we have been conditioned to move past through our emotions. Why? Because we have a lot of work to do. I feel like that's the thing. We always have a lot of work to do, right? We have to work harder. We have to keep other things important. And it feels like our emotions are barriers. If I stop and think about how sad I am, I'm going to lose momentum. That's not true. And we can pause and try to figure out how we can navigate our emotions with confidence. And so Sherry and I are excited to welcome all of you that can join us on July 19th.
So excited, guys. I call it the PAW acronym. We need to pause, acknowledge, and work through these
I
emotions.
love it.
Yes. And work through these emotions. And this is going to give us the opportunity to see again that we're not alone in this journey and we're all trying to figure this thing out. Just so that we can stay afloat, keep moving, but keep moving in a healthy aspect and in a healthy way. And one thing that I
Yes.
want to say, Joy, it is a well-deserved topic that needs to be at the center of this conversation for today. Listen, I want to say this. In this journey, I have been judged, and that's another thing that happens
Mm,
in the minority community because when we reach out for mental health therapy, we get judged a lot. And I was judged and still continue to be judged on how I grieve and how I move through my healing process. But what I had to learn, Joy, is who cares what they think,
yeah,
right? I This is real talk for real life.
that's
And
right.
I
We're
had to
keeping it
say,
real.
we're keeping it real. Who cares what they think? And I don't know if you guys want to share that belief, but I have come to that point where I can't worry about anyone judging me in my healing journey. I have to do what it takes to keep me afloat so that I can stay healthy mentally for myself and for my family.
Yes.
So journaling has been an amazing tool. So I'm hoping to see each and every one of you all come out, be a part of this great event. It's an opportunity to meet some new people. It's an
Yes.
opportunity to see that we're not alone in this emotional, I wouldn't say battle, but we're not alone. And that's the biggest thing that community plays when we are going through those, like you said, you talked about it, when we're going through those rough times and community
Yes.
pulls together, it makes all the difference in the healing process. And so remember, this is about you and your healing. This is about you and discovering who you want to become. And this is about you understanding your emotions so that now you can be in a position to teach the younger generation that it's okay to say, I need help, that it's okay,
Yes.
right, to get therapy, right?
Yes.
But what I want the
Absolutely.
audience to know, Joy, what's not okay is pretending that you're okay when you're
Yeah.
really not.
I think that's the whole point of this conversation, right? Stop pretending. Yeah. And if you all have ever been afraid to connect with your emotions, come to our session,
Yes,
come to our workshop. Sherry and I will be there to hold your hand.
yes,
We promise.
yes.
Like,
We promise.
you can come nervous, you can come excited and happy. We will be there. I think we need to be there for each other.
Definitely. And that's what it's all about, community supporting community. So thanks once again, Joy, for being here today. Always a pleasure to have you. If you can please let the audience know, how can they find you on social media?
Yes, feel free to follow me on Instagram, TikTok, or LinkedIn. My handle is the same, Joy Acaso. I provide free resources and prompts to help us really reflect on ourselves.
Awesome. Be sure to look her up, guys, and be sure to follow her. You guys know where you can find Real Talk for Real Life on YouTube. Make sure you subscribe and make sure you tell a friend, a neighbor, a family member about Real Talk for Real Life. You can also find us on Instagram as well. And Women of Dynamic Change, you can find us on all social media platforms, which include Instagram, YouTube. So please be sure to like us, follow us, and share all the great things that we are doing to help every woman reach her full and highest potential. Thanks again, one more time, Joy. Please don't be a stranger.
Yes,
Please don't be a stranger. We hope to definitely see you again and see you really soon. I know I
absolutely.
will be seeing you in a
Yes,
couple of weeks. And so I'm looking forward to seeing your beautiful face and just learning so much more about navigating my emotions. So, guys, as I tell you every Sunday, if it's God's will, you will see me again in a month. Bye now. Take care.